The Washington Commanders are doing more than simply attending Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy's pro day. And to me, it's a sign that what is happening with the number 2 overall pick is far from set in stone. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And from there, you will get text messages directly from me on news, analysis, one-on-one conversations, bonus content, no hashtags, no apps needed, none of that. You text me, I text you. We all have a good time. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become a Locked On Commanders insider today. I'm David Harrison, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, everydayers, I appreciate your continued support for the program. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. On this episode, this is a mailbag episode. We're going to talk about Washington's draft strategy, what it means, what it could mean, and some ideas on what they could do with some of their picks, thanks to our insiders. We're also going to talk about the potential conundrum that the Chicago Bears will be facing trying to draft Caleb Williams and how that could potentially impact the Washington Commanders. But first, we are going to start with the Washington Commanders taking a visit to see Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy. That, according to Bleacher Report's Jordan Schultz, who tweeted on Tuesday that sources to Bleacher Report say that Michigan quarterback J.J. McCarthy visited the New York Giants last week, which included dinner with the front office and a tour of the facility. The Washington Commanders are flying out to Ann Arbor to have dinner Thursday night with J.J. McCarthy the night before his pro day. That according to multiple sources. Now, we don't know exactly who is flying out to Ann Arbor to visit with J.J. McCarthy. And truth be told, I don't know Jordan Schultz. There's no way for me to necessarily confirm that information. The team certainly is not going to confirm that information to me. But if it's true, which I do believe that Jordan Schultz and the Bleacher Report guys certainly have at least enough of a track record that we can run with it as if the story is true there, then it certainly is impactful. And it's impactful for multiple reasons. And one of those being the Washington Commanders need a quarterback. To be quite obvious about it, the Washington Commanders need a quarterback. And we got a lot of questions from the insiders after this news came out asking me what it really truly means. And some people think it's just simply a smokescreen. Here's what I'll say about the smokescreen. The thing about smokescreen is it has to lead other teams to believe that you're going to do something that you're actually not going to do. That's the whole purpose of a smokescreen, right? Now, J.J. McCarthy at number 2, if the smokescreen is we might take J.J. McCarthy at number 2, I don't know how much of a smokescreen that could really be, because I guess the point would be to get somebody who really, really wants J.J. McCarthy to trade up with you to go get him. But I don't know that anybody's going to want Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jane Daniels, or want J.J. McCarthy over any of those 3 guys. Now, I know that because of his NFL scouting combine reviews and because of the reports of how well he did in the interviews, a lot of people think that J.J. McCarthy is certainly stepping up or climbing up into that top 3. I don't know if I believe that J.J. McCarthy has moved himself inside the top 3 and therefore pushed out either Drake May or Jane Daniels, you would presume, right? Probably didn't push out Caleb Williams. I think more so he's made it a top 4 instead of a top 3, right? So I think you still have your top 3. You've got Caleb up at the top, and then you've got Drake May, Jane Daniels, depending on the order of what your preference is and what you like. And I think from there, you used to have just those guys. And then you had J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. That was the second wave of quarterbacks. But now I think you actually have a top 4. And I think that you have the potential for 4 quarterbacks to go in the top 10 picks, maybe even the top 5 picks because of J.J. So I don't know that I think that he's pushed anybody back. So really, I don't think the smokescreen here would be Washington looking at other GM saying, hey guys, like we might take JJ number 2 if you don't come trade for him. I don't necessarily think that's the case, because I think if you want JJ McCarthy, you're targeting number 3. I think if you want JJ McCarthy over Drake May or over Jaden Daniels, you're looking at number 3 because Caleb Williams, again, right now, at least from the outside looking in, is the clear-cut number 1. I think most people agree, again, either Drake May or Jaden Daniels is the number 2 if Washington keeps the pick. A lot of experts say Drake May. A lot of outsiders say Jaden Daniels. It's really just kind of depends on how you see the tarot cards unfolding. And then the New England Patriots are an interesting spot because I will tell you that in my conversations with Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots, he thinks that they're going to take a quarterback at number 3, and it's either going to be Drake May or Jaden Daniels. But a lot of the mock drafts have been having the New England Patriots trade out from number 3 and actually end up taking like a wide receiver in a lot of those cases. So that's very interesting as well, considering that Jacoby Brissett is the guy that they have. But either way, if you trade into the top 2 or 3 picks, you're probably not taking JJ McCarthy, right? So to me, that smokescreen doesn't really fit the narrative of why they would be going and doing this. Now, what's another reason they could be going and doing this? Well, simply and quite obviously, because maybe they're interested in trading back themselves. And this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to trade back. I think it just means that they're open to all the possibilities, right? And then again, that's nothing new. That's what Dan Quinn, that's what Adam Peters, the general manager, have been telling us all along, is that they're literally open to everything, obviously, except now for Sam Howell becoming or being the starter. So if they go through and they trade back and essentially run the risk of not getting maybe the guy that they like the most, then what are the reasons for doing that? Well, I've kind of said this all along, that if you don't love somebody at number 2, then you shouldn't be spending the number 2 overall pick. If you just like somebody, you can like a lot of people. And let's be clear about this real quick here in this segment. There is no one quarterback option for any of these teams, right? Like I hope we all understand that the name you put on the card is obviously, that's the biggest part of draft night, right? Like that's who you're going to add to your roster. But whether or not that person is successful, right? We talk about this with Justin Fields. You talk about this with like the Joe Burrows of the world. The key is, do you have a plan to emphasize and to accentuate that player's strengths? And then does that plan work? And there's a lot of different layers to whether or not the plan actually works out or not, right? So really at the end of the day, if you're the Washington Commanders, you're like, bro, we just got to have this guy, then go get him in number 2. But if you're sitting there as a staff, you go, okay, guys, what if it's Jaden Daniels? Oh, coach, we can make Jaden Daniels work. Boom, 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 boom. We can make Jaden Daniels work. All right, what if it's Drake May? Coach, we can make Drake May work. Boom, 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 boom. Here's how we make Dre work. What about JJ? Oh, coach, we can make JJ work too. Boom, 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 boom. If you got 3 quarterbacks that you could, quote unquote, make work, then you trade out of number 2. Now, if you trade out of number 2, but you know you still want a quarterback, how far do you trade back? That is another question that has evolved in this, because if the team is interested in JJ McCarthy legitimately, and this is not just smoke and mirrors, then how far back would they or should they go in order to try and do this? And here is my kind of wildly concocted theory. I think what you do is you get the New York Giants on the phone, because the New York Giants want a quarterback, right? So you're at number 2. The New York Giants are willing to take the guy they just really like versus the guy they like. And, obviously you're sitting here saying, well, who is that guy? It's Drake May. Okay, cool. It's Drake May. So you pay us a king's ransom to move from 6 to 2. You take Drake May. The New England Patriots, according to Mike Debate, stick at number 3, probably take Jaden Daniels. The Arizona Cardinals are interesting, because the Arizona Cardinals are now entertaining trade ideas for a quarterback at number 4. Now you get back in the conversation. And if it's me, I've already got this lined up, right? Like if I'm looking at the Arizona Cardinals, I'm going, hey, Arizona Cardinals, you're trading out of number 4. We're going to take it. If I get this, this, and this, and this together, will you take this deal? And then you move from 6 to 4. If the New England Patriots do what a lot of the experts think they're going to do, and they trade out of number 3 and say the Minnesota Vikings move up to number 3, the New England Patriots move out of number 3. Okay, cool. The Cardinals are not taking a quarterback. Now the Cardinals they're in a market where you're either going to sell to 2 picks back to number 6 with the Washington Commanders, or you're going to sell to pick number 12, I think it is, with the Denver Broncos. You don't want to move from 5 to, or from 4 to 12 if you can control it. So you're going to pay a little bit, but ultimately, if you're the Washington Commanders, you will net draft capital. You will keep some of that draft capital. And if you can really work it out, you only spend draft capital that you've earned from other teams. So you've got a 2nd round pick from the Chicago Bears, 3rd round pick from the 49ers, another 3rd round pick, based on the trade from the Seattle Seahawks after the Sam Howell trade. And then whatever draft picks you get from the New York Giants to move back to 6 in the first place. Only sell picks that you just gained from other trades this last season or this offseason. And now you move up to number 4, worst case scenario, to get your quarterback. If you're really lucky, the Cardinals are like, nah, bro, we're taking Marvin Harrison Jr. number 4. You're crazy. And now you trade up with the Chargers number 5, and they get the benefit of, well, we only move back one spot and get a little bit of a deal. You're not going to get a great deal, but you get a little bit of a deal, and you get your quarterback at number 5, which is J.J. McCarthy. The question following that, of course, which is not part of the mailbag episode, would be, is J.J. McCarthy ready to start? Or are we looking at Marcus Mariota rolling out to start the season? I am sure we will have plenty more conversations about quarterbacks. Speaking of which, we're going to have kind of our first really in-depth conversation about Caleb Williams coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by eBay Motors. With passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die vehicle alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and even level it up to peak performance. They've got superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED lights, and more. Whether you are looking for speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has what you need, and they've got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die vehicle, you are always going to find exactly what it is that you are looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're going to be burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Continuing on now, today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Make sure you come back tomorrow. We'll be diving deeper into the free agent additions to the Washington Commanders roster, what it means for the current roster, and what it could mean for the NFL draft. As you know, Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for Major League Baseball's season preview, coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. Again, that is March 20th, Wednesday, when this episode is dropping, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Locked On Sports Today's 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. So make sure you check that out. We're here for a mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders. We've just been talking about J.J. McCarthy because once the news came out that the Washington Commanders are supposedly flying out to meet J.J. McCarthy before his pro day, have dinner with him, do all that kind of stuff, do the whining, do the dining, a lot of people just got very, very, I would say energetic. Some were excited. Some were big fans of the idea. Some not so much. Some very angry that the team might move back from number 2. And some just downright confuzzled that the Washington Commanders might take J.J. McCarthy at number 2. Again, I don't think that's what's happening here. From the smoke and mirrors perspective, we kind of talked about that. We talked a lot about that kind of stuff. But there's a quarterback in this equation that we have not really talked about. And that is quarterback Caleb Williams. And we got a question about Caleb in the mailbag coming from Willie, who asked, what do you think the odds are that Caleb pulls an Eli Manning move and refuses to go to Chicago and comes to Washington instead? They were talking about it on Smoot and Jinx, Get Loud podcast, and I think that was an interesting thought. So I will tell you right now, I don't know what Fred Smoot and I don't know what Jinx we're talking about, so I don't know exactly where they're coming from. But obviously, this is an idea that has it's got its legs, it's got its merits or whatever. And certainly there's a history for it. Eli Manning was not the first quarterback. For those who don't know, Eli Manning famously or infamously, whether it was him or his father or whoever from his camp, basically told the San Diego Chargers at the time, we're not going to play for you. Eli's not going to play for you. And I don't know if Eli wanted to play for the Giants. Can't remember that deep into it. But whatever it was, basically, we're not going to play for the Chargers, so don't draft him. They drafted him anyway. They made him go up on stage and take pictures with the Chargers hat and the jersey and all that stuff, looking obviously not happy. And then the New York Giants drafted Phillip Rivers, and there was a trade, and Eli ends up playing for the Giants, wins a couple Super Bowls. Supposedly he's going to go in the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday, all that stuff, and everything works out. So basically the question is, would Caleb Williams do that to the Chicago Bears? Now, I can't speak for Caleb. Certainly there could be, but I will tell you this, that my perception, my assumption the entire offseason has been the Chicago Bears will draft Caleb Williams, which answers the question of why we have not talked about Caleb Williams much on this program, to be quite honest with you. And I know, look, he's a DMV guy. He's from the area. I completely respect that. I completely respect the storyline behind that. He was asked about, the thought of returning home in his NFL scouting combine interview. And he said, that's home. Obviously, that'd be cool, whatever, all that stuff. I totally get the storyline. And, look, truth be told, maybe I could steer into it more. And maybe you'll give me a few more clicks. Maybe you'll give me a few more downloads because of that connection. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think Caleb Williams is going to be available past the number 1 overall pick. And I don't think the number 1 overall pick is going to be made by any other franchise than the Chicago Bears. Now, I've been wrong before, and I'm perfectly fine being wrong. Believe me, I don't think you could do this job for longer than a week if you're not okay being wrong sometimes. But when it comes to opinions and takes and observations and impressions like this, there is not if you ask me to put a percentage on how confident I am the Chicago Bears are drafting Caleb Williams number 1, it's 100. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that this is happening. Again, doesn't mean I'm right. Have talked to Lauren Cox, host of Locked On Bears, quite often about this. We've talked about it on Locked On NFL. I've talked to him on the side, text messages, all that stuff. And he agrees. He does not see a reality where the Chicago Bears do not draft Caleb Williams. But as the question in the mailbag says, what if Caleb says, well, I'm not playing for Chicago. Bottom line, I'm just not going to go to Chicago. I want to go to DC. I want to go home. I don't want to go to Chicago. Here's the thing. One, I don't know that Caleb Williams does that because if he was that dedicated to playing at home, he wouldn't have gone to Oklahoma. He wouldn't have gone to USC. I mean, there are Power 5 programs in his neck of the woods, right? Like Penn State is probably the club. I mean, I know Maryland's a Power 5 program, Virginia Tech's a Power 5 program, Virginia, et cetera, et cetera. But like, if you wanted to go to a really good school that has a pretty good track record, like Penn State is an option. I mean, you could stay on the East Coast somewhere else, whatever. But going to Oklahoma, going to USC, spending all that time away from the DMV, I don't know that's something that's in Caleb Williams' wheelhouse. Really, is just being like, I just need to get back to the East Coast. I just need to get back to the DMV. I don't believe that's the thing. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the Chicago Bears kind of strike me as a franchise, guys, that will not care. Because here's the thing. Caleb Williams wants to be great. Caleb Williams probably wants to be a legend of the game. He wants to be one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game and all those things. I don't know that encompasses or that includes sitting out a year, right? Because that's really the only threat he has is if you draft me, I'm not signing my rookie deal. I'm going to sit out. I will be back in the NFL draft next year. A la Jim Kelly. That's what Jim Kelly did to the Buffalo Bills. Jim Kelly didn't want to go to Buffalo. I don't remember where he wanted to go, but basically they drafted him anyway. They said, yeah, okay, blink. He didn't blink. He went to the AFL or whatever it was at the time. This USFL, I think it was, played for a little while and then ended up coming back and said, okay, I'm yours. And at the end of the day, like, he's not going to, like, the Chicago Bears still have his rights. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not the route that Caleb Williams is going to go. I don't think Caleb Williams can go that route. If the Chicago Bears don't want to let him go that route, he's not going to go that route. And so the response could be then, okay, but why would you draft a player that doesn't want to play for you? Well, because at the end of the day, guys, he's going to play. Like, he's going to go out there and give his best. He has to. He doesn't have a choice, because if Caleb Williams goes out there for 4 years or for 2 years or however long it takes him to basically frustrate them to the point of not wanting to play, look at quarterbacks in history who have stood up against their team, who have defied their team into the realm of not playing well because of the conflicts going on with their team. It's not going to go well for him. It's not going to go well for his legacy. It's not going to go well for his wallet. It's not going to go well for his rep. It's kind of career suicide. Now, again, Eli Manning got the Chargers to blink. So is there a possibility here where the Chicago Bears draft him, trade him to Washington? Okay, I could buy that. I could buy off on that, certainly. But I don't think it's going to be a situation where the Chicago Bears, kind of like the Chargers did. Eli Manning got drafted by the San Diego Chargers, period. Forever, Eli Manning got drafted by the San Diego Chargers. I don't think the Chicago Bears are going to move out of that pick. I think best case scenario, if you're hoping this happens, Caleb Williams is drafted by the Chicago Bears. They trade him to the Washington Commanders. The other part of this whole thing is, if Caleb Williams tries to force the hand and say, like, I'm not going to play for you, so eventually you're going to trade me, right? Like, eventually you'll trade my rights. If you're the Washington Commanders, you're not going to take that risk. So at number 2, if you love Jaden Daniels, if you love Drake May, just a little bit less than Caleb Williams, you're still going to take your quarterback. And now your hometown team has a quarterback. They have a first-round quarterback. They don't need you anymore. They're not going to draft for you or trade for you. So again, the only thing that you could see Caleb Williams do, in my opinion, is force the Bears to draft and then trade him. But either way, Caleb Williams is getting drafted by the Chicago Bears. So that's my take on that. More NFL draft conversation coming up with our mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, who wants you to say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game in the NCAA basketball tournament, whether you're betting on a big upset or you're betting on the number one seed, any of the number one seeds. It's time for you to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win the whole thing. Selection Sunday went down. Of course, it had its normal brand of drama, but either way, UConn men are favored to win the men's tournament. South Carolina women are favored to win the women's tournament. And if you still want to stick to NFL futures, the 49ers are still favorites to win Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, Louisiana, where, by the way, former Washington Commanders defensive end Chase Young signing a one-year deal with the New Orleans Saints. Congratulations to him. The Kansas City Chiefs have the second best odds to come out of the AFC and win their third straight Super Bowl. Meanwhile, the Washington Commanders odds, as predicted, pretty low, so you can make a good amount of money if you make a bet there and they pull it off. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. However you want to bet, whatever you want to bet on college hoops so they cut the nets down. Whatever it is you want to do, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the National Football League. Wrapping up today's mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks for making Locked On Commanders your first listen, your first view today and every day. And I like this mailbag episode here this week, guys, because it's been a lot more conversational, a little bit more speculative, right? And I know some people don't necessarily like all the speculation, but speculation is part of the job, and I'm happy to do it. It kind of reminds me of being on the radio, and we just get to kind of talk about what is, what could be, what might be, but do it from a place of at least, some sort of knowledge and familiarity with what's going on, as much as we can have anyway, from a brand new staff that has done a very good job of holding their cards very close to the chest. So we got a couple of draft related questions here. One coming from Ravi, who says, this might be an obvious question, but with who the team has signed so far, does this give a hint on who the team might be targeting in the NFL draft? And Ravi, I don't think it's an obvious answer whatsoever, but certainly one that I had a lot of fun sorting through to try to answer here on this mailbag episode. And I think that when you look at what Adam Peters and the Washington Commanders have done this offseason, they brought in 20, they've agreed to 20 new contracts, right? They've got 16 external free agents coming in, 4 internal free agents coming back. That includes the signing or at least the agreement to sign offensive tackle Cornelius Lucas. That happened on Tuesday, so he will be back, which makes him and Andrew Wiley, I think, your top 2 tackles. I think that's really where we got to start this conversation because, coming into the offseason, I mean, you could look at needs in the secondary, linebacker group, defensive line, specifically the edge, offensive line, certainly. There's a need at wide receiver for, kind of a bigger body target, tight end room, especially with the release of Logan Thomas, and then quarterback, right? All those were questions or needs, however you want to shake it out. Some of those have been kind of answered, right? Like the edge group, you see them bring in Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell, and Dante Fowler. They bring back F.A. Obada. You got KJ Henry, got Andre Jones Jr. Like, you have a pretty stocked edge group right now. Now, I don't know that you have that top end talent that most teams want to have. So I do still think you can see the Washington Commanders take a swing on a guy early on, which is what we're going to talk about here next as well. But I think that kind of shows you, like, you probably shouldn't expect 2 or 3 defensive ends, edge rushers, things like that. But then there's other position groups that you kind of look at and say, okay, they might have brought somebody in now, especially like a guy on a 1-year deal, like a Zach Ertz, but what's the answer in the future? And if you look at like the tight end room, Zach Ertz, 1-year deal, veteran, older guy, John Bates, Cole Turner, Amani Rodgers. Literally nobody there proven to stake a claim to the starting job for the long term for the Washington Commanders. So is tight end still on the board? Absolutely. Is tight end still on the board in the first 100 picks? Absolutely. Doesn't mean they will. No, not necessarily. I mean, the board's going to fall the way that the board falls. Okay, you look at some other guys here that have 1-year deals. Cleveland Farrell's on a 1-year deal. Jeremy Chin is on a 1-year deal. Michael Davis, a new cornerback, is on a 1-year deal. Benjamin St. Juste is on an expiring contract. Like, this is his last year of his rookie deal, right? So there are a lot of guys, and that's kind of where you have to look too, is who are some of the guys on this new roster that fill a spot right now, but don't fill a spot forever. And what does that position group look like? So if you look at like Jeremy Chin, we talked about this before. I think Derek Forrest, to me, is more of a strong safety than free safety. I think he's more versatile than a lot of strong safeties, which is great. But I still think he's more of a strong safety than free safety. So you bring in Jeremy Chin, who's definitely a strong safety, more of a linebacker type safety than he is anything else. And you look at him and you say, how, Jeremy Chin, 1-year contract. Is this because Derek Forrest was injured, or is this because we just don't know who Derek Forrest is? I think it's more so because Derek Forrest is injured, which means if Derek Forrest comes back healthy and is able to kind of prove to this staff that upward trajectory that he was on before he got injured is legit, then maybe you see them re-sign Derek this next offseason. Jeremy Chin walks away as a free agent, but you could still potentially see a late round pick invested in that position group, right? So that's kind of give you the look there. Linebacker group, Bobby Wagner is the top dog. Anthony Pittman has more of a special teams background. Frankie Louvu is on a multi-year deal, but Jamin Davis is going to be on an expiring contract once the team declines his 5th-year option. So really looking beyond this year, because Bobby Wagner could hang it up at any time, you got Frankie Louvu. So do you need a linebacker still? Absolutely. Do you need him in the top 100? Maybe not, because you got Bobby Wagner, you got Frankie Louvu, you got Jamin Davis. So it gives you flexibility if you're the Washington Commanders. Doesn't mean they won't take a linebacker in the top 100. Absolutely not. What you can tell from what Adam Peters is doing is he's creating flexibility outside of really a couple of things. The number 2 overall pick is going to be spent on a quarterback. Bottom line, whether it's Washington or a trade, it's going to be spent on a quarterback. If they trade out, everybody's going to assume you're taking a quarterback with wherever you trade. If you trade to 4, if you trade to 6, if you trade to 12, they're assuming you're going to take a quarterback. So the Washington Commanders' first pick, probably a quarterback. Next pick, probably going to be an offensive tackle. And it's kind of okay right now for the Washington Commanders to be projecting that they need an offensive tackle with their second pick, because this offensive tackle class is very, very deep. So the fact that you know that kind of doesn't matter to a sense, because there's a lot of really good, talented offensive tackles in this group. And that brings us to our final question of the mailbag, which comes in from Fran.
Hey, David, Insider Fran here for my question for the week. For your draft, do you think Washington might trade number 34, maybe 130, to move up to the latter part of the first round to try to get Chop Robinson? I think that might not be a bad idea. Or they can maybe trade 34 and 66 to move higher in the draft, maybe go for an OT. What do you think?
All right, so Fran is kind of bringing up some very specific scenarios here. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at having 2 second-round picks, 3 third-round picks, right? They've got 3 third-round picks right now, number 67, 78, and 100. You certainly have the capital to move up. I mean, if you look at, the top 2 second-round picks, pick number 36 and pick number 40, those combined for 1,040 points, according to the Jimmy Johnson draft pick trade value chart. So 1,040 points, guys, moves you all the way up to basically number 15. Number 15 overall to the Indianapolis Colts is 1,050 points, so you're a little bit shy, but that kind of gives you an idea of where you are. And according to Daniel Jeremiah's latest mock draft, number 15, the Colts take cornerback Quinyon Mitchell, which I would love Quinyon Mitchell, to be quite honest with you. But number 16, the Seattle Seahawks take Washington Huskies offensive tackle Troy Fautanu, which is a great fit for obvious reasons. J.C. Latham from Alabama goes to number 18. So there's another guy. Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma goes number 20 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's look here. Amarius Mims out of Georgia goes 25th overall to the Green Bay Packers. I mean, we just can continue to go through here. Chop Robinson goes 31st to the San Francisco 49ers. So the Washington Commanders have the flexibility just in draft capital. I mean, again, those 2 picks alone will get you up enough, to get one of those tackles off the board if you want them. And Olu Fashanu is a guy that, a lot of public boards have him slipping, into the late teens. I don't think he's going to go that far. I think New Orleans at number 14 is probably the furthest that he goes. But when you look at the possibility, could Washington trade up, whether it be an edge rusher or a tackle? I think you're probably most likely looking to trade that 40th overall pick or 36th overall pick, not both, one of the 2, and then maybe one of those third-round picks to move up. So if you're doing that from a value standpoint, you're probably looking at closer to like the 20 range. But again, you're still looking at a guy like maybe J.C. Latham is available, Amarius Mims might be available. So you're still going to be able to get a quality tackle in this class because of the depth of the group. So if you're the Washington Commanders coming into April and everybody knows you need a quarterback, you need at least one offensive tackle, in this scenario, that's not all that bad. But the other position groups, interior offensive lineman, wide receiver, tight end, defensive line, linebacker, secondary, you could go anywhere with those. You can make a case for the Washington Commanders to draft a player at every single phase in the NFL draft, and that is true flexibility, and that's what keeps other GMs on their toes. So to answer the question, yes, absolutely, the Washington Commanders could, maybe even should, package picks, trade back up into the first round. But again, if you trade out of number 2, look, if the Commanders come away from meeting J.J. McCarthy, they've already seen him throw once, you see him throw again, The scouts have seen him throw in person several times. They love JJ, and you can trade back to say number 6. Maybe you trade back up to number 4 or 5 to get him. That capital that you then recoup gives you more than enough ammo to trade back into the first round, get yourself one of those offensive tackles, potentially keep number 36 or number 40 to take a defensive end, to take one of those edge rushers, or maybe take a cornerback like TJ Tampa. A lot of good opportunities for the Washington Commanders. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about all the possibilities, a lot of fun to see what they end up actually doing in April. But that is going to wrap up a fun mailbag episode. So thank you to everybody who submitted questions. Insiders have submitted extra questions. Don't worry, we will have a command huddle. The plan is to have a command huddle this weekend. I am finishing my drive to Orlando on Saturday, so bear with me. Depending on how that trip goes, I may have to skip this weekend. I know I already skipped last weekend, so I'm going to do my best not to skip this coming weekend. But in the meantime, we've got more episodes coming of Locked On Commanders, film study coming to Insiders, so you guys are getting plenty of stuff fed to you as well. If you got questions or comments, throw them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders Insider. Join subtext.com/Locked On Commanders, especially if you want to get in on these film studies. They're just starting. They're just beginning. They're only going to Insiders. So join subtext.com/Locked On Commanders if you want to get in on that. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team